people have said to me when they look at my photographs of Bob Marley, they feel that he's still there, that he's not passed, he's not died, whatever way you want to see it. And to experience that magic, because when you look at these images, you know, you do get that feeling, because the thing about these images, none of them were taken in a studio. They were all taken on the road, even in hotel rooms, in apartments where we were staying, live on stage, backstage. Never used flash, it was all available live. And I think when people see it, they will really walk out feeling enlightened.
Second six.
I'm Dennis Morris, photographer, and we're here at the Known Gallery for the Bob Marley Giant exhibition, which is at my first Bob Marley show in LA. This is Babylon by Van. Now, there's an incredible story about this. Basically, I think about 4 or 5 days into the tour, what happened was, he and the Wailers woke up and they wanted to play football, and they opened the curtain, and when they looked through, it was snowing, and he said to me, "Oh, why that?" So I said, "It's snow, Bob." He said, "What do you mean snow?" I said, "You know, snow." He said, "Snow?" And then Peter Tosh and Bunny Wailer said, "It's a sign from Jah, we have to leave Babylon." And they had this discussion amongst themselves, and they left, and the tour collapsed. After all the expense of the record company had put up, the sight of snow killed it, and they left. This one is called Shopping for Trenchtown Kids, and this is where I found out that on that tour and many tours after, whenever he had time off, he would always go to sports shops or clothes shops, and in particular sports shops, because he's such a big football fan, and he would buy like 20 footballs, 20 pairs of football kit, 20 pair of boots, and it was always it was for the kids of Trenchtown. He was a very, very generous man with his wealth, but he spent a lot of money on the kids and the community of Trenchtown. Now this one is called Nice Time. Apart from football, he really loved table tennis. But this one, every time women see this, for obvious reasons, they love it, because he was a very, very fit person, very athletic, and so when they see that, it's a woo, yeah, Bob Marley. And this is where one of the things that happened when he died was they realized there were 16 children. Women loved him, and there was a story where he said, one said, "I want to have as many children as pebbles on a beach." He came quite close. There's several things, like for instance, people may not know this, but he had the first BMW in Jamaica, and the reason for that was the BMW with Bob Marley and the Wailers, which then became synonymous that every black man who, from Jamaica to England, wanted to show that they were successful, the car you have to have was a BMW. He put, I mean, there was just so many things like that. Also, half of Jamaica literally depended on him, you know, because a lot of people would go to the house he had, because he had this house in what they call a street called Hope Road, was the same street as the Prime Minister's house. Now, before Bob Marley's success, if a Rasta was seen on that street, they could literally be shot by the police. Bob Marley had a house on that street. You could not touch him. You could not touch any Rastas. Suddenly, everybody who was from what they call uptown, they all wanted to have locks, because it was like, well, you know, it was cool, you know, that. I mean, Jamaica suddenly, it found itself, it had an identity, you know, as in itself. It freed itself of the colonial past through Bob Marley. That was incredible, what was going on. I mean, it's like that movie, when we were kings, you know, we were kings, you know, he was King Bob, you know, and there was, wow, it was phenomenal, you know, what was happening there. This is Trenchtown Rock. This is in the garden of his house in Hope Road. It's a beautiful house. It was an old colonial house, which was actually given to him by Chris Blackwell, who owned Island Records as part of the record deal. And he was constantly refurbishing the place, rebuilding, putting a studio and stuff. But what I love about this is just the way he's sitting in a very regal manner. like a king sitting on his throne with his feet on the footrest, and these Adidas, he was so hip without even being hip, and this is what everyone's wearing today. This one's called The Wailer, and again, as I said, the way we worked together and we're being together, nothing was ever posed, everything came as it was. And it was just amazing that at that time he was standing in front of that door which had that word, The Wailer, with Marley, and that look of his, in that sense. It's kind of ironic because in some ways he would always be in the right place for me to get that image. Everything about us was magical, I couldn't have planned it. I couldn't have said to him, stand there, look, it was just, I just had to see it, take it, and then it came. From the very humble beginning when we were in that transit van, he hated it because the winters, he couldn't handle winter that time. The food was horrible, he couldn't deal with the food because they wanted Untitled food, which is more or less like vegan, vegetarian food. So when he got the success, he would have his own cook, would travel with him, he's on charge, the whole thing. And there's a story where basically we arrived in Germany on the tour, and he was staying at the Hilton, and he had the entire top floor of the Hilton because it had its own kitchen. So we arrived into the reception, and there was this woman who had this beautiful full-length fur coat, and she was being checked in. And the guy was checking her in, looked around, saw Bob Marley, just left her. She made a whole heap of fuss. He just looked and said, he says, Bob Marley, who are you? And he was swept in. And then on top of that, later on during the evening, everyone was smoking, but there was so much smoke, it set off all the sprinklers. So the place was like, it was like raining inside. I mean, all kinds of stuff was happening. These are two of my favorite live shots in black and white, and they were taken at Hammersmith Odeon. Now the thing about the Hammersmith Odeon was, at the time, Hammersmith Odeon was the sort of premier rock venue. But he did a series of nights, I think about 2 or 3 nights there. And one of the things he did was he brought in these special bass bins. And it was said to be the loudest Hammersmith Odeon had ever been. I mean, you could hear it from miles, just and what I love about this one as well is just the way that his locks are flying almost like a helicopter blade. And the other thing about him, again, which I saw with him, is that he was very expressive in the way he performed. So even if you didn't understand, like for instance when he played in a foreign country, if you didn't understand what he was saying, you really knew what he was saying through his expressions of the song. He acted out every single song. No Man No Cry, I Shot the Sheriff, bye, 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 And that's what made him so electric. And I remember from that first tour, and I think he was actually crafting his stage presence and performance. And I remember on that first tour, after one particular gig, he came backstage and he turned to the band and he said to them, you see when I'm on stage and I start jumping around and shaking my legs, just keep the music nice and steady, man. Don't speed up, because they were speeding up every time he moved around. He said, no, just keep the music steady. Just let me just go free. And that's how it was. So every gig, from the height of it, the band would just be rocking, just keeping it steady, and he'd just be flying across the stage, flashing his lock, and you just get that beautiful music, man, I tell you. Well, his passing was tragic. I remember that, sadly, and I was there when it happened without even realizing. He was playing football, and I never played football with them because it was just too physical. It was like a war zone. It really was. They were very physical. And to show how physical it was, he was playing football and someone tackled him and he took out the nail from his big toe. And he went down, he was in real pain. And, but, we never thought much of it. And I've got a shot which is not in the exhibition, because that is a particular shot I don't particularly like to show too often. And he was, the next day they were playing in Paris, and there's a shot of him on stage with the toe bandaged. Never thought anything of it, but it turned out that was the injury that killed him, because that injury became cancerous, because, like, you know, reflexology, it spread from his big toe to the brain. And they actually said if he had cut off the toe, he would have been able to survive, but he refused because he wouldn't have his balance, because he was such an energetic performer. He just couldn't do it, you know. He thought he could beat it, but never thought from that day, that injury, that whole thing would lead to what it came to in the end. Never in a million years did I ever think that, you know, and I can remember it plainly. You know, never thought it would do. Well, we're 24 hours away from opening, and as I stand here and look around, I'm immensely proud of the show itself, the way it's being presented. Great to have an opportunity to actually present the work in a way which I think is fitting and for it to be shown. And I really feel that when people walk in, they will get the vibe of it all and get a feeling of what it was like to be around Bob Marley. Because I think when people stand in front of the images, they will also feel that they were this close to him to smoking a joint, you know, or that close to him in the van, or in the shop when he's buying a football, or sitting in the garden with him, or jumping around while he's flashing his locks, or feeling the power of the positive vibration in that sense. And I also think, in a very sad way, they will understand what it would have meant for me to be sitting with him, to see your hero, your mentor, your whatever you want to be. It was like, how can I put it? It's like watching Superman sitting next to green kryptonite. It's not a pretty sight, you know, when it's, well, you know what green kryptonite does to Superman, it drains his power. And that's what I felt when I saw him there. Something was wrong. I didn't know what it was. But again, there is a beauty about that picture when you look at it. There is a certain silence about it, you know. Yeah, that's all I can say.